Hey guys, this is a World Chess Championship recap of Game 7 with Ding versus Gukesh. And Gukesh has the white pieces, and he plays knight f3, the Zucker opening. And Ding plays d5, the most common response, I believe. At least on Lee chess. I guess in the Masters, the most common is knight f6. And we get a similar structure where both players fin-kettle their kingside bishop, castles, and so right here, Gukesh plays rook e1, which is provoking Ding to take, and so he does, and then we get e4. Now white has the center, and black could try to hold on to this pawn on c4 with b5 in the future, but it's a bit risky as this bishop's going to become really strong. So Ding doesn't want any of it, and he plays c5 instead of like playing b5. As there's also like h3 ideas. So we get d5, we get e6, we get h3, and now bishop has to take or it's trapped. Bishop takes. And now we have a position where black can't take this pawn as there's tactics. I believe it's takes, and then the bishop is hitting this pawn is the main issue. After, like, say that knight's gonna need a move, so we just get a normal developing move. Not bishop. Knight d7 takes, and material is equal, but white has this passed pawn. We get b5, forcing this knight to move back. Knight a3 to reroute it to c2. And we get queen b6 defending this pawn. We get bishop f4. Now these bishops are really strong. We get rook e8 challenging this rook that had the e file. We get queen d2, just getting ready to bring this rook over. We get rook d8, and now we get knight c2. Knight c2, rerouting the knight, and this knight will allow a later b4 push. Ding plays a bit passive with knight f8, and so this allows Gukesh to immediately play b4. We get c4. We get a retreating move, and it's not like obviously the best move, but it's pretty practical. Just hitting the queen. Queen goes to a6. Bishop reroutes to d4. So now this bishop is challenging this one. We get a trade from Ding, and he decides to go for this pawn. And although Ding is up a pawn, it allows counterplay, and Gukesh just could win the pawn back if he wants to. But he plays really accurate with rook a3, forcing the queen to go to b1. King slides up. This king's really safe here. Ding plays rook d7, just defending this pawn once. Gukesh could still take, but he plays the best move, which is rook a5, going for this pawn, because this pawn is defending this passed pawn right here on c4. So this one's a bit more valuable than that one. And then also taking here, at least with the rook, would trade down. But the bishop might allow counterplay. We get queen b3 with the idea of going to d3. So we get a repetition of moves, and then Gukesh takes. We get rook d3. So trades would not be good as this passed pawn is going to be difficult to deal with, and that allows black to win this pawn, I believe, in the future. So we get queen f4. Bishop e3 would have been a bit better, like just leaving, I guess, I would say the tension, but mainly like black can't really do anything. That this black queen can't really go anywhere good. It's in between all of white's pieces. And by going here, if black ever trades, that's going to be good for white. But that's the engine move. Queen f4 is still a really good move. And it's only like not that good if black plays g5, but Ding plays queen takes c2, which again is a very human move. Playing g5 is like an engine move. And then we get a trade of knights there, right? And then Gukesh decides to go to the endgame and trade down, which again is very practical, and he still has a really good position. We get, I believe, rook c5. Yeah, hitting this pawn. I always accidentally press like the down arrow, which skips to the end. We get knight g6. We get knight e5, and as you can see, both players are really low on time. Gukesh was up in time. Like, Ding's already really low here. So we thought Ding would lose this game as Gukesh just kept building an advantage. And Ding got really low on time. But what was the long thing for Gukesh? I guess it was going for this rook a5 idea. It was the best idea. So, I mean, it was worth spending the time. But I think, yeah, why did he after he repeated, he spent even more time. That's kind of odd. So he spent a little too much time on finding that idea. So they both get low on time, and Ding basically needs to find only moves to defend. So he reroutes his knight, and he reroutes it to here where it's hitting this pawn and defending this pawn. So like objectively, like this is drawing, but he makes another inaccuracy right here. You should play knight c8, just creating a blockade here on the dark squares because white has a light square bishop. But he brings his king up, and it's a very simple blunder because white is able to win this pawn. And if black continues to defend it, white can go for this pawn, and then if you go back, white can attack both pawns, and you can't defend both. So, and technically you could, but it's a very passive position for black, and white should be able to just improve their position and eventually activate their king and win. So Ding takes instead of going for that passive position, which is a practical try. And Ding doesn't want to trade here because like we have this endgame where white has this passed pawn. So he plays knight c3. Knight f6 would have been better, but I mean, this is just like both of these moves are fine. Practically speaking, I'm not going to pretend to understand because I'm not an engine. Knight e4, centralizing the knight, kind of nullifying this bishop for a bit. So best move actually is to take. But you could play h4 as well. But like takes and h4 I think is another idea. Basically this h4 pawn is going to force one of these pieces to defend, and then white will be able to win these pawns basically. We get king e1, which is still a good move, but obviously it's a little inaccurate as basically Gukesh had a like more forcing win. And this allows Ding to find some defending ideas, playing this, allowing the rook to slide over to defend this h-pawn. Also, now there's not two pawns on the same, I guess would be rank. We get h4, still a fine move, but allows more counterplay as like this combined with this was very inaccurate. If the king was like still here, it could go to g2 to defend the bishop, but now it can't. And so when the rook hits the bishop instead has to move, or the king has to defend here instead of here. So Gukesh decides to just drop all the way back, but this allows f4, shattering white's pawn structure, and if white doesn't take, I believe it will be losing. For example, I think, well, I mean, white can play g4, but allows the rook to come in, I guess. But also, like, there are mating ideas, I think, of f3 with, like, the rook coming over here, right? I guess it's just rook over here to win this pawn. Let's look at the line. If here, yeah, there's f3. And there is a mating net. So white has to give up the bishop. So, yep. This was an inaccuracy. The king needed to be a little more active. If this, I think the king can just move up, perhaps, and takes and stuff. But it would still be a draw, I think, with perfect play. But this just throws away any chance of winning, really, as Ding plays extremely accurate. And this is, let's see, hitting. So let's go through the moves again. Bishop c2, hitting the rook. Rook moves. We have two attackers on the knight. And if, let's say, rook here, I believe there's just f3 perhaps or something, or there's like h5, but f5 is just the most accurate. Oh yeah, if the rook ever goes here, white can just trade down, and this is a winning endgame. So f5. So if ever takes, you take with the pawn. So rook stay on the board. We get rook b4, and let's just go through the moves. So king goes to f3. Being a bit active, king has to go to g2. If here, there's f3 because the bishop defends the pawn. Rook b3 cuts off the king. Rook e5 only move, basically creating threats on the king, forces Gukesh to do something, and he plays f4, hitting the rook. Rook e6 would have been more accurate, but it's hard to see why. I mean, you have to calculate all of this, where you stop the pawns just barely. I think with, yeah, like you can go knight f8 and you stop the pawn, and the bishop can't defend because of black's pawn. So it's hard to see that. So he just went here and slid his rook over this way, and Ding wins this pawn, and Gukesh wins this one. So he does have a passed pawn here, but practically speaking, it's going to be a draw because this king is not active. So we get Ding going for this pawn, and Gukesh defends it. Then the king chases the pawn, forcing it to move out the board. Now this king is way more active than this one. So we get knight e4. If the pawn pushes, I believe you can just go knight here and knight takes, right? Because there's no checks because the king is behind the pawn. So that's pretty much what we get. We get bishop c2, which, you know, there's not really much for Gukesh to do. This is a trick though, because I think if rook takes, there's a trade, and then this rook is not hitting this pawn, so the king can't like go here because there's just no time to defend this pawn. And again, if like the rook went here, there's a check. So it's a good practical try, but the knight can just drop back defending these two squares. We get rook here and just plays king e5. Now the king is again coming back to hit that pawn. We get bishop here. There's some lines where I think you can get rook and bishop versus rook. I think you get it by this one, right? Yeah, takes. And this is a draw, but it is, you do have to still defend. But he just brings his knight back, and he will be able to pick this up. And again, like if, say, takes, you just take with the king, and this will be a draw. So let's just go to the final moves. We get a check, forces Ding to take. King moves up. Rook b6, defends the pawn with the bishop. And then we get rook d6, forcing the rook's to come off the board and allows the knight to take this pawn and draw. So that was the game. Gukesh had a bunch of chances to win, but he got low on time and it wasn't able to convert. If I go back to when he made some of those moves right before time control, yeah, like he already lost his advantage. Like he was already getting low on time when he went into the end game, so that was one reason why he lost the advantage. And then when Ding gave him an advantage again, he was in time control, and they did have increment, but he just couldn't find the win, I guess, mainly in the end game at least. So in that aspect, Gukesh just couldn't convert. So the first one, I guess you could say, is because of time trouble, and then the second one is he just couldn't really find the win. But yeah, that was the game. And I'm doing this recap as game 8 is going on. And again, this is a bit late, but I'll have game 8 soon. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.